It is such a pleasure to be here tonight with all of you. Thank you so much to the rector, to the president, Mr. Armani, to the Enel Foundation team. In these past months, we have already started our interaction. I've started to look into the reality of Enel and to discuss together the research topics that in the next few years we will develop. And I want to thank the Enel Foundation team, especially Director Giulia Genuardi, for the very effective collaboration that we have started. So this chair, as the rector mentioned, starts from asking a hard but fundamental question that pertains to how to go into the energy transition with a broad vision that correctly links what's happening in the energy market to the broader transition that our societies are undergoing to deal with the transformation of our economy and our world in a world where we pay attention to what's happening to climate change and to decarbonization, which is essential to make our world livable in the next decades. Now, in understanding how we as economists can contribute to this key challenge, I want to start by bringing your attention to one specific policy that I hope can convey how crucially policy in the realm of climate change is interlinked with changes in the energy market and specifically in the electricity market, and how one needs to have an integrated vision to understand these two. So this is one of the most cherished auction environments for economists, is let's call it the electricity auction as a more technical name, but let's call it the electricity auction. Now, without entering into any technicalities, but what is important here and what do you see here? You see a word on the left of the arrow where essentially technologies are producing at their own price, and then there is a clearing price for electricity. And this is, in Italy, when Enel was a monopolist, there was nothing like this. The government, together with Enel, was deciding what was the fair price for electricity. And this was basically the same in the whole world. And then liberalization created a world in which instead producers, thousands of producers, produce and sell in a market. In which market? An auction market that clears demand and supply. And this is the beauty, and economists have contributed and have taught long and hard about the functioning of this very effective system, which sorts technology by their cost, and so gives an advantage to those technologies that have a lower cost. Then policy arrived. The fear of this world that was becoming warmer and warmer brought the European Commission to introduce the ETS system, the emission trading scheme for carbon pricing. And these impacted directly these auctions. If you look at the right of the arrow, this is the idea that now carbon-emitting technologies have a cost. There is a price for something that before did not have a price, which is carbon, CO2 emissions. And this price is proportional to how polluting is the technology. And so you see, for instance, is this very stylized example that coal production shifts to the right because the increase brought by ETS is so large that it makes it not cost-effective anymore. So the idea here is that this kind of policy intervention, acting through market, really changed not just the price, which is higher, but also the investments. It changed the technologies. It led to exit of carbon. In Italy, basically, there is no more carbon production, and electricity produced via oil is also extremely, extremely limited. On the other hand, renewables expanded. So this policy goal of decarbonization transformed the electricity market. Of course, this is just one of the policies. There are many other policies. But together, they contribute. And they produce what we called, in the title of this event, the new energy order. What's this new energy order? Is the fact that if you look at this graph, The net installed capacity that we have in Italy, this is for Italy, but you have similar pictures across the whole Europe and in most of the world, renewables have exploded. And we have now a world in which solar and wind, that not thousands of years ago, but just 10 years ago, were considered really marginal, minimal technologies, today they supply a large and growing share of the electricity that we consume, both in civil and industrial needs. This has gone along with also a change in the pricing. On the right, you see the electricity price. You see what happened with the, with the invasion of Ukraine and the spike in gas price. But also you see at the bottom the constant and relevant role played by ETS, by the carbon pricing. So this is the new world order. And this is so important that the very first question that we are asking with this collaboration, with this chair is, what are the macroeconomic effects of all this, of this new system, of this new environment? And what we're bringing as Bocconi is state-of-the-art methods to this analysis. And so, for instance, here applying some recently developed techniques of high-frequency estimation of shocks to do causal analysis at a macroeconomic level, we are quantifying, for instance, what's the effect of shocks to the price of the ETS on the economy. These are macroeconomic aggregates of the Italian economy. So the results are in line with what we would expect. We see that there is an increase in inflation, that there is a reduction in production. These numbers for Italy are, for instance, in terms of production, the effect is about twice as large as the drop in production compared to the average European level. But also it's very interesting to see that greenhouse gas emissions decline and decline permanently. So the system is effective, but at a cost. How big is this cost and how the cost is distributed? This is something that we also want to address, because this can do what was mentioned before by the rector and by Mr. Armani, guiding good policy. Where are the effects concentrated so that we can guide policies toward helping these sectors? And for instance, we have from this analysis results about the impact in the energy producing sector, which is substantial and persistent, and effects in the manufacturing sector that instead fades away over time. Of course, we are in a world, fortunately, with very rich and granular data. So we can go very much into the details of the Italian economy sector. And so when we disaggregate, we can also ask, are sectors that have electrified more their production, their need of energy, suffered more or less? How much electrification worked as an absorber to shocks? And these initial results show that indeed sectors that are more electrified have 1/3 of the effect of sectors from energy shocks relative to sectors that are less electrified. So all this looks good and promising, but here let me bring a big problem to the picture. Here we enter into the second part of what our chair will study. I say our because it's me, but it's jointly with this big family of Bocconi researchers in this area, as the rector was saying, and also with the many students that have already started to collaborate. The microeconomic part is problematic because incentives don't work well from where we are to go onward. Read the first couple of bullet points and see what's happening in terms of the progress of the solar transition. The solar transition is continuing, but is slowing down dramatically. Why is that? Well, I guess that the first answer you have in your mind is politics. There is a change in what voters want, and there is a change in what governments are delivering. And this is certainly part of the story, but it's not the whole story. Another issue is siting. Over time, especially in Europe, it's becoming harder and harder to find proper sites where we can put solar fields and wind farms. Not only, we have the big issue of transmission. Without transmission, there is no transition. So, and transmission is complicated because the whole world simultaneously is doing these investments. And you know, the producers of the materials that one needs to deploy to do the transition were not used to the whole world requesting simultaneously. So there are huge bottlenecks and transition is going down. But this is really a pity because we have seen from rigorous analysis, for instance, in the Chilean market, when they were able to connect the north side where there is a desert, the desert of Atacama, that is very sunny and produces a lot of electricity to solar, to the southern part where is Santiago, Valparaiso, where there are factories. When they were able to enhance the connection between these two parts, they saw amazing effects in terms of reduction in the cost. Cost of electricity went down by 8%, greenhouse gases went down 5%, and investments in renewables increased by 180%, even in anticipation. Just when it became clear that the government was serious about this investment, private investors immediately started to create. So transmission is crucial. But not only. There are many other factors. Permitting is going down despite the best effort. Gas prices now are expected to go down, and this is disincentivizing investment in solar. And then demand, data centers. You have, all of you probably have heard about the role of data centers that are increasing a lot. They are forecasted to become about 12% of the consumption of electricity in the next 10 years should come from data centers. Now it's slightly less than 2%. So the growth is exponential. And on the other hand, tariffs are slowing down the economy, so this creates uncertainty. So it's becoming harder and harder to predict demand. But there is one more factor that is very, very microeconomic, which is the one described in the final set of bullet points about price signals. So those beautiful auctions that I described before have stopped working properly. What's happening? Here, this graph is the number of hours, the total number of hours across European electricity markets that have a negative price. Negative price, so the clearing price is below zero. A strange auction, one that clears at a price below zero. There is a lot of curtailment. There is gigantic cross-hour variability. So these are auctions that clear the price hour by hour. And now the price often is changing by hundreds of euros from 1 hour to the next hour. Solar and wind capture rate, so how much your investment is able to capture, is going down a lot. So all this, for an economist, is very obvious and clear. What's happening is that as we grow the amount of renewable energies that is deployed, the marginal value of one more unit is declining very fast. As Mr. Armani was saying, the cost of these investments is not fixed. It's changing. The cost can go certainly high if siting is becoming harder, but also by the fact that, for instance, solar energy is produced when there is a lot of sun, and when there is a lot of sun, everybody else is also producing. So you are deploying new power when there is a lot of power already there. And so this is certainly decreasing a lot the gain that you can earn. And so this is very problematic. The microeconomic incentives are tilted. So there is not the same value today of adding 1 more megawatt of solar power relative to when we were at a share that was much lower of electricity, of green electricity. So, and here this is the second part of our research, we are going to study how to fix this. Well, European Commission has suggested a solution that fortunately agrees well with what also economists think that is the solution, that is long-term contracting. And this was already explained in the previous intervention. That is, you've made the comparison with the real estate sector. Exactly. So when you deploy, contrary to producing using gas or oil as input, in which you have your fuel, and this fuel determines what is the cost of producing, with a solar plant, you have the initial investment, and then the marginal cost of production is nearly zero. So it's a totally different cost structure, and this requires a totally different organization of the reward. And so what we need to foster is long-term contracting. There are two main forms, what are called PPAs, power purchase agreements. Think of these as private contracts. There is a generator, a producer, that contracts with a large buyer. Can be a utility company or can be a pure private player. For instance, in Europe, who has been the largest buyer in these PPAs? Any idea? I'll help you. You're too many, so I cannot listen to all of you. It was Amazon. Data centers. But why Amazon was such a large buyer? Also because Amazon is a trustworthy company. So if you need to enter a long-term contract for 20 years, you would trust Amazon that is financially solid to repay. But think now of the typical structure of Italian firms. They're not so financially solid as Amazon. We are a country of mostly small companies, and signing these PPAs is much harder. So the market, as of now, has not picked up yet. So this is an issue. Second, CFD, contract for differences. This is another type of long-term contracts in which, however, the counterparty to the producer is typically a government or a government entity that purchases this kind of contracts and has this financial structure for which it guarantees to the producer a certain strike price and absorbs changes in fluctuation in the spot market. So what we are doing and what we will do in the years to come is study in depth the frictions that are making these instruments, these types of long-term contracting, not yet working, but potentially working in the future, and understanding how we can contribute through research and analysis to the best evolution of this portion of the market, fixing asymmetries in information, fostering the role of guarantees to complement the fact that, as I was telling you, security and counterparty risk is a big obstacle to deployment of this. Fostering also public sector demand. The public sector is a huge buyer of energy. In Italy, the total expense is 12 billion. Central and local authorities buy every year about 12 billion of energy products. Electricity is about half of that. And clearly we are talking about entities that have a long-term horizon and that also have clear green goals. So bringing part of this demand to this sector would be very important. And finally, the integration of CFD and PPAs, because the European Commission has decided that they should coexist. And so, but designing auctions where they can coexist is complex, and this will be an important area. So to conclude, we're just at the beginning of this journey, but I hope I gave you the message. The transition and the new energy order is here to stay, but in order to work properly and to deliver on all the desiderata, that is a transition toward green energy, sustainable price, and resilience, by making Europe more strategically autonomous, we need the better integration of short-term and long-term contracting. We are at a pivotal moment, both for Europe and for Italy, in which many reforms are taking place, and so having a solid research to guide these political evolutions in the sphere of the green reforms and the energy markets will be absolutely crucial. So once again, thank you so much to Bocconi and to Enel Foundation for giving me the possibility of working on these topics. Thank you.